Aborigines have feasted on oysters for thousands of years up and down the New South Wales coastline. The shellbeds can be found in kitchen middens left by the Aborigines even today. Some of these shellbeds have even been carbon dated back as far as 10,000 years. Oysters became a nutritious food source in 1821 for the first settlers in Port Macquarie. This came about when the convict settlement was established on the bank of the Hastings River. The first 3 ships transported 60 convicts to Port Macquarie from Sydney. The voyage took 31 days to complete, and because the journey took so long, the stores of food on these ships were almost depleted. The sea had compounded the situation as well, as some of the remaining stores had been affected by salt water when the ships eventually reached Port Macquarie. The river provided the settlers with fish, waterfowl such as wild duck, and of course oysters. The European settlement all along the New South Wales coastline greatly increased, and with the population expansion, the need for housing in settlements also grew. Oyster shells were burnt to make lime for cement production, and here in Port Macquarie, Lime Burners Creek reminds us that, like other areas, the natural oyster stock was dwindling. The government introduced controls regarding the loss of the original natural oyster stock, and the cultivation of the oysters began. Along the mid-north coast area of New South Wales, local oyster men grow the Sydney Rock oyster. Timber cutting, shipbuilding, and oyster farming were early industries undertaken in Port Macquarie, and while shipbuilding has gone from our area and forestry has diminished, oyster production has continued on for over 100 years. Oysters are commercially cultivated in New South Wales to the south of Sydney as far as Eden, and northwards to the Queensland border and the Tweed River. New South Wales has over 32,000 aquaculture leases for oyster production in 41 estuaries. The main producing areas have been the Hawkesbury River and the Wallace Lake. Over the years, 3 methods of oyster cultivation have been used.
Industry started here on rock catching, on sandstone. They put 3 pegs in the ground, sit the rock on it and catch them. And the pictures that we've got, you can see them all down around Westport Park and all that. And what they bring them into their boats and they cull them off. And then they went into sticks, and they're 6 foot 1 inch terp sticks tarred.
Rock culture is seldom practiced now, but in early days of Port Macquarie, sailing ships used limestone blocks, brought from Sydney as ballast. The blocks were offloaded here to make way for the ship's cargo bound for Sydney, and because it was known that the oysters grew readily on the limestone rocks at the Sydney Harbour shoreline, the blocks were utilised here to grow oysters as well. Another factor in favour of this was that the oysters could be dislodged from the limestone quite easily. Stick culture has been the mainstay of the industry since the 1930s. Tarred hardwood sticks, 1.8 metres long, are placed in the areas of the estuaries where the oyster larvae or spat can readily settle. This is usually near the mouth of the rivers. The sticks are then moved from this site to prevent overcrowding of the oysters on each stick. The sticks are then placed on horizontal racks further upstream in the intertidal zone. For the next 2 years, great care is taken ensuring that excessive heat and predators such as bream, octopus, and stingrays do not destroy the growing crop. After 3 or 4 years, the oysters reach maturity and are ready for harvesting. Tray culture uses trays 1 metre wide and from 1.8 to 2.7 metres long. The trays are constructed of timber, wire or plastic and have many advantages as a cultivating method. Trays are easily transportable and allow precise stocking densities to encourage oysters to grow in a uniform and marketable shape. Nowadays, oyster farms are removing the spat from the sticks or the PVC slats very soon after the oyster has settled onto the object. They are still only 3 to 8 millimeters in diameter at this stage, and they are placed on the specifically made trays or in the plastic cylinders that move with the tidal flow and protect the growing oyster from the predators. Eventually, as the oyster grows, it will be removed from the cylinder, placed on the covered trays, reach maturity, and be ready for consumption. The Sydney Rock oyster is unique in its ability to live out of water for up to 3 weeks in cool, moist conditions. This is longer than any other oyster variety in the world. In a country as vast as Australia, this means that fresh, unfrozen oysters can be available almost anywhere year-round for us to enjoy. Sydney Rock oysters are nutritious, low in cholesterol, and rich in vitamins. And currently, there are over 106 million oysters produced annually, and the crops are worth approximately $35 million. Oyster farming has been the most valuable aquaculture industry in New South Wales for over 100 years.